So I'm Sarah Wagner, Professor of Anthropology at George Washington University. I'm part of the Rituals in the Making project. That's a 5-year study funded by the National Science Foundation that focuses on COVID death, mourning, and memorialization. The behind-the-scenes look today was an opportunity to explain to a larger public and just a chance to kind of reflect on the installation. The Rituals in the Making project, which is sort of student-centered out of the anthropology department, has collaborated with Suzanne Furstenberg in archiving and transcribing the flags so that we will have a comprehensive database that will be essentially a digital snapshot of the installation for posterity.
The installation was created because people don't understand numbers. When a number gets so large that people don't understand it, it's easy to ignore. Our nation needed a moment to pause. By blanketing 20 acres of the National Mall with white flags, I hoped that it would give people an understanding that it was time to reflect. I knew as well that people needed to have their loved ones acknowledged. These were deaths that happened in private, away from the public eye, oftentimes without funerals. And so it was important to give people the opportunity to have their loved one acknowledged publicly. And that's what the art allowed us to do. And I suggested to visitors when they attended the art exhibition, I said, just look down at one flag and imagine the concentric circles of grief. That person had a family. That person had neighbors, an extended family, a work family, a community. Think about all those people who were affected by that death. And then raise your gaze and look at all the flags that are here.
It was one of the few memorials where that, the enormity of the loss felt very tangible.
I've done hospice volunteering for over 25 years. And that experience has taught me that in grief, it really helps people to have some action to take.
Bearing witness in the context of my project means that it gives people a space to tell the stories that they need to tell so that we know they're bearing witness to their experiences. So I felt like having the writing toolbox was essential because even though the writing advice is really not very big, in the memorial book it is. There's pages and pages and pages of ideas because so many people are afraid to write. But my feeling always is like, yes, you can. You may not write like the longest story, but you can do this. And one of the ways that I've, I guess, tried to make that clear is by having part of the submission form on the website, you have to put a title on it. It's one of the required fields. There's very few things required except like your name and then the person you're remembering, but you have to have a title on the story, and I have not had anyone yet who can't do that. So even if you put on it my father or my mother, just that simple, I feel like it gives the story, it grounds it.
I think there's something so empathetic about reading another person's words of grief and remembrance and trying for just that moment to imagine, right? Imagine that life, but also imagine what someone is feeling without that life right there with them. At the same time that you're taking in 700,000 flags and you see the scale of it.
So it was immediate that I wanted to write it down. Like I felt like I had to. And I think part of that was just disbelief. Like, let me get the facts down. Did this really happen? I was also afraid I was going to forget the details. I was never going to forget the big picture of losing my mother, but I didn't want to forget every last detail of what happened during those like 3 or 4 weeks. When I wrote it down, I was not intending to write a book. I was just writing it down, not knowing what it was going to be. And so I needed other people to read it and say, yes, this isn't just something you wrote down for yourself. And then once it started to get into that realm of maybe, getting sent out to editors and publishers and then eventually getting published, then I started to get a little bit more, how am I supposed to feel about this? Am I supposed to celebrate this? How could I? Then it became complicated. I guess there's two two aspects to it. There's the person who, let's say, is doing the storytelling. So by my writing a book about my mother and my mother's death, I am bearing witness to that. And this is true of any art form, right? If somebody's making a film or a documentary or they're writing poetry or whatever. So there's that part of it. And then there's the part where somebody actually takes it in and reads it, and there's that connection going on.
So I think it's not necessarily how do we move forward, but how do we make space for grief and for mourning and for recognizing loss. And I think that, that kind of empathy, that enables us to be a better society. So I don't know, I'm like the moving forward, sometimes it invites people to like close up that grief, put it aside, or just move on, right? And I think we haven't done that.